Turns out, catching your husband burning evidence of his secret love child in your kitchen sink creates a special kind of marital bonfire, one that comes with complimentary custody hearings and alimony payments. There I was, standing in my immaculate Lake Forest kitchen with overpriced Starbucks pumpkin cold brew dripping from my frozen fingers, watching my husband of 14 years transform into an Olympic-level paper destroyer. Graham's face morphed from concentration to pure horror when he realized I was 5 hours early from my HR conference in Chicago. Nothing says, "I'm totally not having an affair," like frantically trying to extinguish evidence while screaming, "You can't see this." For a financial consultant who advises millionaires on their investment strategies, Graham was displaying the subtlety and composure of a toddler caught finger-painting the living room walls. His Brooks Brothers tie was askew, his carefully styled salt-and-pepper hair stood on end, and he had that wild-eyed look I'd previously only seen when our homeowners association threatened to fine us for having the wrong shade of beige on our mailbox. "Ophelia, you're home early," he sputtered, frantically trying to drown the smoldering paper remnants while simultaneously shoving others into his pockets. In his panic, he knocked several sheets onto our Italian marble floor, one of which performed a perfect figure skating routine right under our kitchen island. With the casual grace of someone who's spent years pretending not to notice her husband texting under the dinner table, I bent down to retrieve my fallen lipstick and snagged the paper. The universe has a twisted sense of humor sometimes. Or maybe it was karma finally picking up my calls after I'd ghosted her for years of blissful suburban denial. There it was, printed on official Lakeside Women's Clinic letterhead, a positive pregnancy test for Paige Montgomery, 28, with a paternity test confirmation naming Graham Mercer as the father. The test was dated exactly during the period my husband was supposedly working 80-hour weeks on that Boston project. Funny how Boston apparently required so much overtime that he couldn't even FaceTime with Nash and me most nights. "Give me that!" Graham lunged across our massive kitchen island, knocking over the decorative bowl of perfectly arranged lemons I'd set out that morning. Such a waste. I'd spent 15 minutes positioning those lemons just right for my Instagram post about morning gratitude rituals. "Is this why Paige suddenly got promoted last spring?" I asked, scanning the document. "Because nothing says qualified for a raise quite like carrying your boss's baby while his wife plans your office baby shower?" Graham's face cycled through emotions faster than our son Nash clicks through Netflix options. "It's not what you think," he stammered, reaching for the paper again. Classic line. Next, he'd tell me she meant nothing to him, like that somehow made impregnating his 20-something assistant better. "Let me guess. She tripped and fell on your DNA?" I clutched the paper tighter while doing quick mental math. The document was dated from February, exactly 9 months ago. The due date was circled for next week. "This was a mistake," Graham pleaded, his face contorted into what I assume he thought was sincerity, but looked more like constipation. "A one-time thing during the Boston project." "Interesting how a one-time thing managed to create an entire human being," I replied, noticing the doctor's notes about co-parenting plans scrawled in the margins, and apparently requiring multiple meetings with her OB/GYN, where you've been discussing custody arrangements. Graham ran his hands through his hair, creating a look that screamed midlife crisis, more than his recent purchase of a Tesla had. "I was going to tell you, after I figured things out." "By figuring things out, you mean incinerating the evidence in our sink?" Bold strategy. Is this what they're teaching at those financial leadership retreats now? Arson 101 for adulterers? The timer on our smart oven chimed, reminding me of the irony unfolding. I'd set it that morning to remind myself when Weston would arrive for our weekly Wednesday wine night, a standing appointment that Graham consistently forgot about. Now I understood why. Nothing kills the mood of an affair like your wife's divorce attorney best friend dropping by for Cabernet and charcuterie. "Graham, your timing is impeccable, as always," I said, glancing at the clock. "You have exactly 28 minutes to explain why I shouldn't call your boss Douglas right now and tell him his star financial advisor is burning client information in our kitchen. I'm sure Callahan Financial would love to hear about your document disposal methods." Graham blanched. "You wouldn't. 30 minutes ago I wouldn't have. But 30 minutes ago, I thought I was married to a workaholic with a slight addiction to fantasy football, not the star of How to Get Away with Impregnating Your Assistant. What Graham didn't know was that the universe had already been rearranging pieces on my behalf. Earlier that day, I'd received and accepted an executive HR position in Seattle, a dream job I'd been secretly interviewing for over the past month. The offer letter was sitting in my purse, next to the bottle of Dom Perignon I'd bought to celebrate what I thought would be a difficult conversation about relocation. Now it looked like that champagne would be christening my independence instead. "Did you even think about what this would do to Nash?" I asked, my voice quieter. Our son was the only reason I was keeping my voice down instead of reaching full suburban banshee mode. "How exactly were you planning to explain to our 12-year-old that he has a newborn half-sibling?" Graham had the audacity to look offended. "I love Nash more than anything. Except, apparently, condoms," I retorted, earning a wince. My phone buzzed with a text from Weston. "Got that Barolo you wanted, ETA 20 mins. Should I grab dessert too?" A plan began crystallizing in my mind with the clarity of the diamond on my finger. The one Graham had upgraded for our 10th anniversary with what I now suspected was guilt-motivated generosity. "You know what's interesting about this situation?" I asked, sliding the incriminating paper into my Kate Spade portfolio. "For someone who specializes in risk management, you've created the perfect storm. Your pregnant assistant is due next week. Your best client's retirement portfolio review is tomorrow, and your wife just accepted a job 3,000 miles away." Graham's face went from ghostly pale to sickly green. "What job? What are you talking about?" I smiled, feeling the strange liberation that comes with holding all the cards for once. "The executive HR director position at Rainier Tech in Seattle. I start November 1st. Which gives me just enough time to file for divorce, sell this monument to your midlife crisis." I gestured around our recently renovated kitchen that Graham had insisted needed Viking appliances, "and get Nash enrolled in a school where he won't have to hear whispers about his father's special kind of family planning." The doorbell rang, announcing Weston's early arrival. Graham's eyes darted between me, the doorbell, and the still smoldering sink full of evidence. "Perfect timing," I said, straightening my blazer. "Weston's a bit early for wine night. You remember my best friend, right? The divorce attorney who specializes in cases involving infidelity and hidden assets? I think you two might have a lot to talk about." Graham's face performed an impressive color-changing spectacle, from ghost white to fire engine red in under 3 seconds. For a moment, I wondered if I should call 911 instead of letting Weston in. But watching my husband have a medical emergency might delay my perfectly orchestrated emotional demolition, and I'd already envisioned how this scene would play out. "You invited Weston over tonight? Tonight of all nights?" Graham hissed, frantically trying to dispose of the remaining evidence, including what appeared to be a sonogram tucked into his wallet. "So much for the business receipts," he claimed to keep in there. "It's Wednesday, Graham. We've had wine night every Wednesday for the past 4 years. The fact that you conveniently forgot about it 53 Wednesdays in a row isn't my scheduling problem." I smoothed my blazer and headed toward the door. Besides, tonight's theme is assets and where to hide them. Seems especially relevant. I swung open our custom mahogany door to find Weston on our doorstep, holding an expensive bottle of Barolo in one hand and a bakery box in the other. Weston Flynn, with his perpetually perfect hair and custom suits, looked like he'd stepped out of a Divorce Attorneys of New England calendar, assuming such a thing existed, which it absolutely should. "Ophelia, you would not believe the day I've had," Weston started before noticing my expression. "And by the look on your face, you're about to make my professional day a lot more interesting." Graham appeared behind me, still adjusting his disheveled clothing and wearing the desperate smile of a man trying to convince the IRS that his golf trip to Pebble Beach was definitely a business expense. "Weston, great to see you, buddy," Graham attempted with false enthusiasm. But actually, Ophelia and I were just in the middle of a private discussion. "About your daughter who's arriving next week, or about my new job in Seattle?" I asked sweetly. Because Weston should probably hear about both, considering he'll be handling our divorce proceedings. The word divorce hung in our foyer like an unwelcome guest. Graham's smile faltered as Weston's eyebrows shot up with professional interest. "I'm sorry, did you say daughter?" Weston asked, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. 14 years of friendship had earned him permanent entry privileges. "Yes, apparently Graham's been diversifying his assets without consulting his primary stakeholder," I replied, leading them both back to the kitchen crime scene, where remnants of burned paper still floated in our sink. "He's been making some high-risk investments with his 28-year-old assistant." "Ophelia, please," Graham pleaded, looking between us like a tennis spectator at a particularly brutal match. "We can discuss this privately." "Privacy went out the window when your DNA decided to replicate with your assistant," I retorted, taking the wine from Weston and expertly opening it with the overpriced automatic opener Graham had insisted we needed last Christmas. Apparently, Graham's late nights at the office were spent creating more than quarterly reports. Weston assessed the situation with the calm demeanor of someone who witnesses marital implosions professionally. "I see. And the evidence disposal in your sink?" "Just Graham's attempt at rewriting history," I said, pouring 3 glasses of wine even though I suspected Graham wouldn't be staying long enough to drink his. "Unfortunately for him, paper leaves ashes, just like his promises." Graham's phone chimed with a text. The color drained from his face as he read it. "Let me guess," I said, sliding a glass of wine toward Weston. "Is that Paige? Having contractions, perhaps? Or just checking in on how your document bonfire is going?" Graham swallowed hard. "She's been admitted to Lakeside Hospital. The baby's coming early." The timing was almost too perfect. I laughed, not because anything was funny, but because sometimes the universe delivers justice with such precise comedic timing that you have to appreciate it. "Well, don't let us keep you from your new family," I said, raising my wine glass in a mock toast. "I'm sure Paige needs her baby daddy more than your current family needs you right now." "This isn't fair," Graham protested, his voice rising. "You're making me out to be some villain." "No, you managed that all by yourself," Weston interjected calmly, taking a professional sip of his wine. "And as Ophelia's friend who happens to be a divorce attorney, I'd strongly advise you not to say anything else without your own counsel present." Graham's face contorted with frustration. "You're already taking legal sides? I'm still in the room. And yet, emotionally, you checked out somewhere between impregnating your assistant and burning the evidence in our sink," I observed, leaning against our quartz countertop. "Really, though, you should go. Paige needs you, and I need to start planning which furniture I'm taking to Seattle." Graham looked trapped between his imploding present and his complicated future. "You can't just decide to move Nash to Seattle without discussing it with me." "Interesting how you suddenly want to discuss major life decisions together," I replied, feeling a spark of genuine anger break through my carefully cultivated sarcasm. "Was that your approach when deciding to father a child with Paige? Did you consult me then?" His phone chimed again, more urgently this time. "You should go," I said, softening slightly. Despite everything, I wasn't a monster. No child should come into this world without their father present, even if that father is currently auditioning for world's most cliché midlife crisis. Graham hesitated, looking genuinely torn for the first time since I'd caught him. "Ophelia, we need to talk about this. About Nash. About everything." "We absolutely do," I agreed. "But right now there's a woman in labor who needs you, and I need you not in my kitchen. We'll have plenty of time to discuss the division of our lives after you've welcomed your surprise sequel into the world." Graham grabbed his keys and wallet, pausing at the kitchen doorway. "This isn't how I wanted you to find out." "Obviously," I replied dryly. "Your preferred method involved arson." After Graham left, Weston and I sat in silence for a moment before he spoke. "So, Seattle?" he asked, expertly pivoting to the less dramatic crisis. I pulled the offer letter from my purse and slid it across the counter. Executive HR Director at Rainier Tech, 40% salary increase, comprehensive relocation package, and, most importantly, 3,000 miles between me and whatever weird Brady Bunch situation Graham's creating. Weston whistled as he scanned the offer. "This is impressive, Fee. When were you going to tell him?" "Tonight, actually," I said with a hollow laugh. "I had a whole speech prepared about new beginnings and family adventures. Even bought champagne. I gestured to the Dom Perignon still in my bag. Now it'll be christening my new single life instead. Does Nash know about any of this? Seattle or... Weston gestured vaguely to the sink where Graham's parental evidence had recently been cremated. No, I sighed, feeling my sarcastic shield crack slightly. He's at swim practice until 7. Graham's mother Sylvie is picking him up. My phone rang, displaying Satan's mother on the screen, my subtle contact name for my mother-in-law. Speaking of... I showed Weston the screen before answering. Hi, Sylvie. Ophelia, dear, came the sugary voice that had criticized everything from my parenting to my choice of Thanksgiving table settings for 14 years. I just got the strangest call from Graham. Something about going to the hospital for his assistant. He asked me to keep Nash overnight and said you'd explain everything. Of course he did. Classic Graham, delegating the emotional fallout to others while he rushed off to his next family function. Well, Sylvie, I said, meeting Weston's eyes with a raised eyebrow. How much do you know about your son's extracurricular activities at work? I'm not sure what you mean, she replied, confusion evident. Let's just say Nash isn't going to be your only grandchild by this time tomorrow, I replied. Graham's assistant Paige is in labor with his child. So yes, keeping Nash overnight would be helpful while I figure out how to explain to our son that his father has been auditioning for a reality show called Secret Second Families of Lake Forest. The silence on the other end was so complete, I checked to see if the call had dropped. See? Sylvie finally said, her voice uncharacteristically small. Should I bring Nash home in the morning? Or, actually, could you bring him to my office tomorrow? I think that conversation should happen on neutral territory, preferably somewhere without memories of his father setting fire to our sink. After hanging up, I looked at Weston, who was already pulling out a legal pad from his briefcase. So, he said, with the efficiency of someone who'd seen this scenario hundreds of times, let's talk strategy. Because Graham just handed you the nuclear codes to this divorce, and I'm thinking we should start by changing the locks. By Thursday morning, I had accomplished more before 9 a.m. than most people do in a week of productivity seminars. I'd changed the locks, thanks to Weston's emergency divorce locksmith, who apparently made a living helping scorned spouses secure their fortresses. Transferred half our joint savings into my personal account, perfectly legal pre-filing, as Weston reminded me, and practiced my "your father made a catastrophically stupid decision" speech approximately 17 times in the mirror. The Lake Forest Starbucks was crowded with the usual Thursday morning crowd, soccer moms in Lululemon discussing their latest Botox appointments, remote workers pretending their lattes justified hogging tables for 4 hours, and the occasional executive looking important between meetings. I'd chosen this location for its strategic advantages. Public enough that Sylvie wouldn't create a scene when dropping Nash off, but private enough for booths in the back where I could destroy my son's image of his father in relative seclusion. My phone vibrated with a text from Cora Barrett, my coworker and confidant at Preston Global HR. Cora, did you tell Graham about Seattle yet? How'd he take it? I stared at my phone, wondering how to encapsulate the nuclear explosion of my marriage in a text message. Me. He took it surprisingly well, considering he was busy burning evidence of his love child who's currently being born at Lakeside Hospital. 3 dots appeared immediately, disappeared, reappeared, and finally, Cora. What the actual fork? Calling you now. I declined the call with a follow-up text explaining I was about to tell Nash and would call her later. As supportive as Cora was, her particular brand of righteous outrage would require more emotional energy than I could spare right now. Through the window, I spotted Sylvie's silver Mercedes pulling into a parking space. Even from a distance, I could see her perfect blonde highlights and permanently dissatisfied expression. Nash hopped out, his lanky preteen frame already showing hints of the height he'd inherit from Graham. The thought sent an unexpected pang through me. How many more reminders of his father would I see as Nash grew? My phone buzzed again. Graham. It's a girl. 7 Libes 2OZ, everyone's healthy. No name, no apology. Just a birth announcement like we were distant relatives who required formal notification. I typed and deleted several responses ranging from, "Congratulations on your spectacular achievement in ruining multiple lives simultaneously," to, Does she have your inability to use birth control or your talent for document arson? Instead, I simply replied, Nash and I will be at Starbucks until 10. After that, we're going home to pack. Your key doesn't work anymore. The bell above the door chimed as Sylvie and Nash entered. My son spotted me and waved, his face lighting up with that innocent smile that hadn't yet been tainted by the knowledge of his father's betrayal. Sylvie's expression, however, had transformed from her usual controlled disapproval to something more complex, a mixture of embarrassment, anger, and what appeared to be genuine concern. "Mom, Grandma let me have Cocoa Puffs for breakfast," Nash announced triumphantly as he slid into the booth opposite me. "Did she now?" I replied, raising an eyebrow at Sylvie, who had always lectured me about proper nutrition and sugar content whenever I allowed Nash anything remotely processed. Sylvie had the decency to look slightly embarrassed. "Exceptional circumstances call for exceptional measures," she said primly, standing awkwardly beside our table rather than sitting. "Nash, darling, I need to speak with your mother privately for a moment. Why don't you go order whatever ridiculous sugar-laden concoction teenagers are drinking these days?" I handed Nash $20, and he bolted toward the counter with the enthusiasm of someone who'd just been granted unlimited access to the forbidden menu items. "It's true then?" Sylvie asked the moment Nash was out of earshot. "Graham really has a—" She couldn't bring herself to say the word baby or child, as though speaking it aloud might make the scandal more real. "Yes, his assistant Paige delivered a baby girl about 3 hours ago. 7 pounds, 2 ounces of irrefutable evidence that your son should have paid more attention in sex education." Sylvie flinched but didn't take the bait. Instead, she lowered herself into the seat Nash had vacated, her Chanel suit immaculate despite having hosted a preteen sleepover. "What are you planning to do?" The question surprised me. I'd expected defense of Graham, or perhaps a subtle suggestion that I'd somehow driven him to seek comfort in younger, more fertile arms. "I'm taking the job in Seattle," I replied firmly. "Nash and I leave November 1st. I've already spoken with the school there, and they're expediting his admission." Sylvie nodded slowly, her perfectly manicured hands fidgeting with her wedding ring, a nervous habit I'd noticed over the years whenever she was genuinely distressed rather than just being judgmental. "And the divorce?" "Weston is preparing the paperwork as we speak. Graham can expect to be served by Monday." Another nod. More ring twisting. Then, unexpectedly, "Good." I nearly choked on my latte. "I'm sorry. Did you just approve of me divorcing your precious son?" Sylvie's eyes, the same piercing blue as Graham's, met mine directly. "Ophelia, I've spent 40 years married to a man who did exactly what Graham has done. The only difference is that social media didn't exist when Harrison fathered his second family in Columbus." The revelation hit me like a bucket of ice water. Graham's father had another family? A daughter, 3 years younger than Graham. I found out when she tried to contact him during his college years. Sylvie's perfect composure cracked slightly. "I stayed because that's what women of my generation did. We pretended everything was fine and drank too much Chardonnay at tennis club luncheons." She reached into her Prada handbag and withdrew a folded document. "This is Graham's trust fund paperwork. Harrison established it when Graham was born, with me as the trustee until Graham turned 40. I stared at her, confused. "Why are you showing me this?" "Because you should know that unless Graham provides financially for Nash's education through college, the trust dissolves and reverts to charity." Sylvie's smile was thin, but determined. Harrison may have been a cheater, but he was adamant that his son would never abandon his responsibilities. I took the document, scanning the legal language that clearly stipulated what Sylvie described. Graham's 40th birthday was next April. He stood to inherit nearly $2 million, but only if he maintained financial support for any children from his first marriage. "Does Graham know about this clause?" "No," Sylvie replied, standing up as Nash approached with a whipped cream monstrosity that probably contained more sugar than he should consume in a week. "Harrison thought it would defeat the purpose if Graham was only supporting his children to get the money. I've kept this particular detail between myself and the family attorney." As she prepared to leave, she leaned down and whispered, "Don't tell him I showed you this, but use it. every last penny, to ensure Nash never feels second best to Graham's new situation. Seattle sounds lovely this time of year. With that bombshell dropped, Sylvie kissed Nash goodbye, reminding him to brush his teeth extra well after that abomination of a beverage, and swept out of Starbucks like a perfectly coiffed hurricane. Nash slurped his drink happily for a moment before noticing my expression. "Mom, is everything okay? Where's Dad? Grandma was acting super weird last night." I took a deep breath, mentally revising my carefully rehearsed speech now that I held a $2 million bargaining chip in my hands. "Nash, honey, I have some news. Actually, a few pieces of news, and they're going to change things for us, but I promise we're going to be okay." As I began explaining about Seattle, saving the half-sister revelation for after we'd established the exciting aspects of our move, my phone lit up with a call from Weston. "Sorry, sweetie, I need to take this quickly," I told Nash, who nodded and returned to his sugary concoction. "Tell me you haven't filed yet," I said without preamble when I answered. "Good morning to you too," Weston replied dryly. "And no, not until Monday as planned." "Why?" "Because I just discovered Graham's about to inherit $2 million when he turns 40, but only if he financially supports Nash through college." Weston's low whistle was audible even in the noisy coffee shop. Well, isn't that a fascinating development? And you know what the best part is? What? Washington State is a community property state, but Illinois isn't. If you establish residency in Seattle before filing, I smiled for the first time in 24 hours. "I think I'm going to need you to come over tonight to discuss strategy. Bring more wine. And possibly a calculator." As I hung up, I looked at Nash. So innocent, so unaware that his world was about to shift dramatically. But as I watched him happily decimating his whipped cream tower, I realized something important. Kids are resilient. And with $2 million of his father's trust fund backing his future, Nash would be more than fine. I had been preparing to play defense. Now, I was ready to orchestrate the most financially devastating offensive in Lake Forest divorce history. Telling your 12-year-old that his father had created a bonus family member is about as fun as explaining tax audits to kindergartners. But Nash surprised me with his resilience. After the initial shock, his primary concern was whether we'd still have good Wi-Fi in Seattle. Kids and their priorities. "So Dad has another kid now. Like today?" Nash had asked, processing the information with remarkable calm as we sat in our kitchen Thursday evening. "Yes. You have a half-sister as of early this morning," I confirmed, watching his expression carefully. Nash considered this while munching on pizza, my go-to crisis food. "Does this mean I have to share my PS5 when she visits?" "She won't be using your PlayStation for at least 5 years, honey," I assured him, relieved his concerns were practical rather than emotional. "And by then, they'll probably have PS7 or whatever." "Cool," he nodded, reaching for another slice. "So we're moving to Seattle because Dad messed up?" "We're moving to Seattle because I got an amazing job opportunity," I clarified, sticking to the positive aspects. "The timing just happens to work out well with Dad's current situation." "Is it because of the trust fund thing?" I heard Grandma mention it. I nearly choked on my water. "What exactly did you hear?" "Something about Dad getting money when he turns 40 if he pays for my college," Nash said with a shrug. "Grandma was on the phone with someone when she thought I was playing video games." "I'm not stupid, Mom." I suppressed a smile. "My son was smarter than we gave him credit for. That's part of it. Your dad has some decisions to make about how he wants to handle his new responsibilities while still taking care of us." By Sunday evening, 3 days after the birth of little Mia Montgomery Mercer, yes, hyphenated, apparently Paige had negotiated that detail during their secret co-parenting planning sessions, our house looked like a logistics company had exploded inside it. Moving boxes lined the hallways, and I'd sorted our possessions into categories that would have made Marie Kondo proud. Take to Seattle, sell immediately, and leave for Graham as reminders of his colossal failure. The doorbell rang at precisely 7 p.m. Graham, right on schedule for the visitation time I'd generously granted him to see Nash before our departure. I'd strategically planned this meeting after consulting with Weston and reviewing the trust fund paperwork Sylvie had provided. Everything was perfectly orchestrated for maximum impact with minimal drama. I opened the door to find Graham looking like he'd aged 10 years in 4 days. Unshaven, bags under his eyes, wearing a wrinkled Brooks Brothers shirt, the universal uniform of a man experiencing the consequences of his actions. "You changed the locks," he stated flatly, as if this was the greatest injustice in our current situation. "And you changed our family structure. We're both full of surprises lately." I stepped aside to let him in. "Nash is in the living room. You have 1 hour." Graham stood awkwardly in the foyer, surveying the packed boxes. "You're really doing this? Just taking off to Seattle?" "The movers arrive Tuesday. We fly out Thursday." I gestured toward the living room. "Nash is waiting." Their reunion was stilted but civil. Nash, bless his adaptable preteen heart, acted like his father hadn't just detonated our family structure. They discussed school, swimming, and the Seattle Seahawks while I pretended to organize kitchen items nearby. Close enough to intervene if necessary, but giving them space. After 45 minutes, I made my move. "Nash, can you go upstairs and make sure your gaming setup is properly packed? I need to discuss some paperwork with your father." Once Nash had disappeared upstairs, I retrieved a manila folder from my home office and joined Graham at the dining table we'd bought together during happier times. "So I had an interesting conversation with your mother," I began casually, watching Graham's expression shift from exhaustion to wariness. "Sylvie needs to mind her own business," he muttered. "Funny thing about family secrets, they tend to become everyone's business eventually," I replied, sliding the trust fund documents across the table. "Especially when they involve $2 million. Graham stared at the paperwork, his face cycling through confusion, shock, and finally understanding as he scanned the highlighted sections. "Is this my father's trust? Where did you get this?" "From the person who's been managing it for the past 25 years. Your mother seemed to think I should be aware of certain provisions." I tapped the key paragraph. "Particularly this one about financial support requirements for children from your first marriage." Graham's face darkened. "She had no right, much like you had no right to start a second family while still legally committed to your first one," I interrupted smoothly. "But here we are, navigating the consequences of everyone's choices." I pushed a second document toward him, the settlement agreement Weston had drafted. "This outlines the terms I'm proposing. Nash's college fund fully funded up front. Half of your investment portfolio transferred to my accounts. The house sold and proceeds split 50-50. "This is highway robbery," Graham protested, flipping through the pages. "You're taking almost everything." "Actually, I'm taking considerably less than Washington state community property laws would entitle me to if I established residency before filing," I replied, savoring his look of confusion. "This is the bargain option, Graham. The fire sale, if you will. Though you're already familiar with setting things on fire." Graham's jaw clenched. "And if I refuse? Then we do this the hard way. I file in Washington after establishing residency. Your trust fund details somehow find their way into the proceedings. Your new family and your company get dragged through a messy public court battle." I leaned forward. "Or you can sign these papers, fulfill your obligations to Nash as specified, and I'll ensure this stays as private as possible." "You're blackmailing me," he said incredulously. "I prefer to call it strategic negotiation, much like you preferred to call your affair with Paige working late at the office." I slid a pen toward him. Semantics are funny that way. As Graham stared at the documents, I delivered my final blow. "Oh, and Douglas Palmer called yesterday." Graham's head snapped up. "My boss? Apparently he was quite concerned when you missed the Anderson retirement portfolio review on Thursday. I may have mentioned you were at the hospital for the birth of your child." "You didn't." "I did, though I neglected to specify which child or family member was involved." I smiled sweetly. "He seemed to think you were with me and Nash during some medical emergency. I simply didn't correct his assumption." The beauty of the situation was that Graham couldn't even be angry about it. I'd technically told the truth while letting his boss draw his own conclusions. "You've thought of everything, haven't you?" Graham asked bitterly. "Not everything." "I didn't anticipate needing divorce strategies when I was planning our 15th anniversary trip to Hawaii," I replied, the hurt briefly surfacing through my calculated composure. "But adaptability has always been my strong suit. Graham looked defeated as he reluctantly picked up the pen. Nash will be okay with this move? With everything? Nash is resilient. He's excited about Seattle, the tech scene, the Space Needle, being closer to his favorite gaming company headquarters. I softened slightly. He'll still see you during breaks and summers. He just won't witness the day-to-day chaos while you figure out how to parent a newborn in your 40s. And you? Will you be okay? The question seemed genuine, a flicker of the Graham I'd married breaking through. I'll be running the HR department for a Fortune 500 tech company, living in a city with actual culture beyond HOA meetings, and free from finding infant-related surprises in my kitchen sink. I shrugged. I'll manage. Graham signed each page with the resigned efficiency of someone ripping off a bandage. When he finished, he looked up at me with a mixture of regret and resignation. I'm sorry, Ophelia. Not for the consequences. I deserve those. But for hurting you and Nash. That was never my intention. The road to hell is paved with corner offices and 20-something assistants, I replied, gathering the signed documents. For what it's worth, I hope Mia grows up knowing her half-brother. Nash deserves a relationship with his sister, regardless of how she came into the world. As Graham prepared to leave, Nash came downstairs to say goodbye. Their hug was awkward but genuine, a testament to the bond that would survive despite the circumstances. After Graham left, Nash looked at me with surprising wisdom in his young eyes. He signed everything, didn't he? I nodded. How did you know? Nash shrugged with the casual insight of someone who had observed more than we'd realized. Grandma Sylvie told me to trust you. She said you'd make sure everything worked out right. In that moment, I felt an unexpected wave of gratitude toward my formerly frosty mother-in-law. Apparently, the Mercer women had formed our own alliance, one that would ensure Nash's future was secure, regardless of Graham's new domestic adventures. 6 months is apparently all it takes to transform from suburban corporate wife whose biggest crisis was a PTA fundraiser dispute to independent Seattle executive who makes major decisions without consulting a man who can't even consult a condom wrapper. The universe works in mysterious ways, often delivering life lessons through catastrophically painful situations, like finding your husband incinerating evidence of his reproductive misadventures in your kitchen sink. April in Seattle brought cherry blossoms, persistent drizzle, and a notification from my attorney that Graham's trust fund had officially been disbursed, with the college account for Nash fully funded as stipulated in our agreement. Outside my downtown condo's floor-to-ceiling windows, the Space Needle stood against the misty skyline, a monument to fresh starts and upward mobility, both literal and metaphorical. "Mom, Dad's calling," Nash shouted from his room, where he'd been setting up for his weekly virtual chess match with Graham. These digital father-son bonding sessions had become their new normal, an arrangement that actually seemed to work better than their previous in-person relationship. Nothing like 2,000 miles of separation to improve family dynamics. "Tell him I'm busy running a department and rebuilding my life," I called back, only half joking. Despite everything, I'd kept my promise to facilitate Nash's relationship with his father. Children shouldn't pay the price for adult stupidity, even when that stupidity resulted in surprise siblings. My phone buzzed with a text from Sylvie, who had somehow transformed from judgmental mother-in-law to surprisingly supportive ally in record time. "Congratulations on your 6-month Seattle anniversary. Harrison would have been impressed with how you handled everything. Nash looks happy in the photos you sent." I smiled, appreciating her unexpected support throughout this transition. Who would have thought my ex-mother-in-law would become one of my biggest advocates? Turns out, women who've been disappointed by the same man often form the strongest bonds. My response was simple. "Thank you for everything, especially the trust fund paperwork. Nash sends his love." Nash emerged from his room looking thoughtful. "Dad wants to know if it's okay to bring Mia to Lake Forest when I visit this summer. He says he wants me to know my sister." I considered this carefully. Despite my justified anger toward Graham, I'd made a conscious decision not to poison Nash against his half-sister. "How do you feel about that?" Nash shrugged with the beautiful simplicity of preteen logic. "She's just a baby. Not like she chose Dad to be her dad. Plus, Grandma Sylvie says she looks like me when I was a baby, so that's kinda cool. Then it's fine with me, I replied, impressed once again by his maturity. Just make sure your dad knows you're coming to Seattle for the gaming convention in July. That's non-negotiable. Already told him. He said he'd change Mia's doctor appointment. Nash grinned. I think he's scared of you now. Good. Fear is the appropriate response to someone whose kitchen you set on fire while destroying evidence of your infidelity. I ruffled his hair. Healthy fear builds character. Later that evening, I sat on my balcony with a glass of wine, scrolling through photos from my first 6 months in Seattle. Nash at the top of the Space Needle. My new office with its view of Puget Sound. The team dinner after we landed the Westridge account. Each image represented a piece of the new life I'd built from the ashes of Graham's domestic arson. My phone rang. Cora calling from Chicago. How's life in rain country? She asked when I answered. Significantly drier than my marriage ended up being, I replied, taking a sip of my Cabernet. How's Preston Global HR without my stabilizing influence? Chaotic. Your replacement is a disaster who thinks work-life balance means checking emails during his kid's birthday party instead of during the actual birthday song. Cora paused. You heard about Graham? My stomach tightened slightly. What about him? He and Paige broke up. Apparently she's moved to Columbus with the baby. Graham's been moping around the office looking like someone stole his favorite calculator. I absorbed this information with surprising neutrality. Columbus. Interesting choice. Why's that interesting? Just family history repeating itself. I didn't elaborate further, thinking of Harrison Mercer's second family in the same city. How's Graham handling single fatherhood during his custody time? From what I hear, Sylvie's doing most of the heavy lifting when Mia visits, Cora replied. Speaking of which, Douglas finally figured out that Graham's medical emergency in October wasn't exactly a family crisis, at least not with his first family. The promotion Graham was angling for went to Thatcher instead. Karma really is having a field day with him, isn't she? I mused, feeling vindicated, but not particularly joyful about Graham's struggles. Success was my best revenge, not his failure. Enough about Lake Forest drama. Tell me about this mysterious Seattle man you mentioned last time, Cora prompted. I smiled, thinking of Elliot, the architect I'd met at a client dinner in February. Intelligent, kind, and blissfully uninterested in producing surprise offspring with his coworkers. We're taking things slowly, very slowly, like glacial slowly. Smart woman, Cora approved. No need to rush back into domestic bliss. After hanging up, I sent Nash a text reminding him about his orthodontist appointment tomorrow, then opened my laptop to review quarterly projections for my department. The promotion I'd received last month had come with greater responsibilities and a corner office, tangible evidence that my professional value hadn't diminished just because my marriage had combusted. Life after marital implosion had proven surprisingly liberating. Without Graham's passive-aggressive commentary about my career ambitions, I'd flourished professionally. Without the constant balancing act of managing his social calendar and ego, I had energy to actually pursue my own interests. It turned out that losing a husband who burns evidence in kitchen sinks wasn't a loss at all. It was a cosmic correction, redirecting me to the path I should have been on all along. They say that when someone shows you who they really are, believe them the first time. Graham had shown me exactly who he was, a man willing to set fire to papers rather than face consequences. In return, I'd shown him exactly who I was, a woman capable of rising from those very ashes, taking her son and the family trust fund to build something better on the other side of the country. As I watched the Seattle sunset paint the sky in watercolor hues of pink and gold, I realized the most satisfying plot twist in this whole ordeal. Sometimes the best revenge isn't just living well, it's living authentically, freed from the constraints of other people's poor decisions. That, and making sure your ex-husband's trust fund pays for your son's entire Ivy League education. Because nothing says, I've moved on quite like financial security and transcontinental distance. You know what's worse than your ex-husband showing up uninvited to your 4th of July barbecue? When he arrives as your younger sister's +1, wearing the grin of a man who's just found a loophole in your divorce agreement. There I was, Sylvie Lockhart, standing in my meticulously decorated backyard, spatula frozen mid-flip, as my sister Thea strolled through my patio doors with Archie Bennett, the man who had promised to love me until death, but apparently found a technicality when he realized my sister was available. The patriotic bunting I'd hung that morning suddenly felt like crime scene tape marking off the death of family loyalty. I had exactly 12 seconds to process this betrayal before my perfectly planned barbecue imploded. My mother Martha's white wine spritzer hit the deck as she dramatically collapsed into a lounge chair, hand pressed to her heart like she was auditioning for a Life Alert commercial. My father Gerald, startled by Mom's performance, knocked over the entire grill, sending hamburger patties skidding across my newly sealed patio like hockey pucks. And there, capturing every excruciating second on his vintage Super 8 camera, was my 16-year-old son Noah, already mentally calculating how many film festival submissions this documentary on family dysfunction would qualify for. "Surprise!" Thea chirped, as if she'd brought a nice bottle of rosé instead of emotional devastation. Her yoga-toned arm was linked through Archie's, and she was wearing the sundress I'd left behind during the divorce because it reminded me too much of our anniversary trip to Napa. "Sylvie?" Archie nodded, with the practiced casual tone of someone pretending they hadn't spent 11 years of marriage learning exactly which of my buttons to push. "You look, well." The silent addition of "considering everything" hung in the air like the smoke from my now flaming grill. Dad was attempting to extinguish the fire with my prize-winning potato salad, which seemed like an appropriate metaphor for what was happening to my dignity. "What a pleasant surprise," I replied, in the same tone I use when the Whole Foods cashier tells me my favorite ice cream has been discontinued. "I didn't realize you two were—" I gestured vaguely with my spatula, accidentally flicking barbecue sauce onto my mother's designer sunglasses. "Dating? Yeah, it just kind of happened," Thea shrugged, as if we were discussing her spontaneous decision to try bangs, not her choice to date my children's father. "The universe just brought us together at SoulCycle 3 months ago." 3 months. Which meant this little arrangement had been going on since Easter, when Thea had asked so many detailed questions about my divorce settlement that I'd assumed she was considering leaving her CrossFit instructor boyfriend. Turns out she was just conducting market research. "The universe," I repeated flatly. "How cosmic. And neither of you thought to mention this alignment of stars to me before showing up at my house? Where my son lives." As if on cue, Noah zoomed in dramatically on my face, whispering conflict establishment to himself. The kid had been watching too many Scorsese documentaries since the divorce. "We wanted to tell you in person," Archie offered, helping himself to a beer from the cooler. The craft IPA I'd bought specifically because he once mentioned liking it, before I remembered I was supposed to hate him now. It seemed like the respectful thing to do. "Absolutely," I nodded. "Nothing says respect like ambushing someone at their own patriotic celebration. Very George Washington of you, crossing my Delaware without warning." My neighbor Deirdre, who had been hovering near the guacamole station absorbing every syllable to relay to our HOA gossip chain, suddenly became very interested in rearranging the corn chip bowl. "Mom, I'm getting great footage," Noah stage whispered, panning between my frozen smile and Archie's hand, which was now resting comfortably on the small of Thea's back, the same spot he used to rest his hand on mine before he decided our marriage was as disposable as the paper plates I was now crushing in my white-knuckled grip. My father had abandoned his firefighting efforts and was now stress-eating charred hamburger buns directly from the package. My mother had recovered enough to drain her emergency flask, which she thought I didn't know about but had been a fixture in her Kate Spade purse since Thea and I had both hit puberty in the same tumultuous year. "Everyone," I announced, channeling my inner suburban hostess, "let's all just enjoy the party. It's Independence Day after all." The irony of celebrating freedom while feeling trapped in a Tennessee Williams play wasn't lost on me. For the next hour, I performed the delicate ballet of serving coleslaw while avoiding eye contact with the happy couple, who had settled into the patio love seat I'd picked out during my post-divorce reclaim your space redecorating frenzy. Thea was feeding Archie toasted marshmallows like he was a baby bird, and he was laughing at her jokes. The same man who had once told me my sense of humor was a bit much for dinner parties. the alcohol supply depleted at roughly triple the expected rate. Deirdre's husband Bruce was on his fifth bourbon, deeply uncomfortable but unwilling to leave what he later described to the entire neighborhood as the best free entertainment since the Wilsons' Christmas lights caught their palm tree on fire. It was when I went inside to get more ice that I spotted it on the bookshelf. Our wedding album, which Noah had apparently taken out earlier for some family history project. The white leather cover seemed to glow with accusation in the afternoon light streaming through my farmhouse-style windows. Without fully forming the thought, I found myself walking back outside, album in hand. "Hey everyone, I found some old photos we might enjoy," I called out with the forced cheer of a kindergarten teacher on the last day before summer break. "Since we're having such a lovely family reunion." Thea's eyes widened as she recognized the album. Archie suddenly became very interested in the label on his beer bottle. "Look, Noah, here's when Aunt Thea was my maid of honor. Remember she gave that beautiful speech about sacred bonds of trust?" I flipped to a page where Thea was fixing my veil, both of us laughing. "And here's Dad walking me down the aisle to give me away to Archie," which apparently wasn't the last time a Lockhart would be handed over to him. Noah's camera whirred closer, capturing my mother's grimace and my father's sudden fascination with the grill's propane tank settings. "Oh, and my favorite," I continued, flipping to our cake-cutting photo. "Look how young we were, Archie. Only 11 short years, 2 kids, and 1 midlife crisis ago." "Sylvie?" Archie started, his tone carrying that patronizing note that always preceded him explaining why I was overreacting. What happened next wasn't entirely planned. As I stepped forward to show him the photo more closely, my foot caught on absolutely nothing, a talent I've perfected over years of creating convenient accidents. The album sailed from my hands in a beautiful arc, landing with a satisfying splash in the center of the pool, pages blooming open like a water lily of matrimonial memories. "Oops," I said, channeling Britney circa 2007. "How clumsy of me." As everyone stared at the album slowly sinking to the bottom of the pool, I calmly picked up the serving spoon and returned to the buffet table. "Who wants more macaroni salad?" I made it with the special dressing Archie always said gave him heartburn. And that, my friends, was just the first hour of how I discovered that in the great American tradition, revenge is a dish best served with barbecue sauce and a side of perfectly timed accident. The wedding album created gorgeous ink blooms as it settled at the bottom of my pool, much like my dignity was creating a lovely pattern as it scattered across my backyard. Noah zoomed in on the underwater spectacle, whispering symbolic visual metaphor into his camera while Thea performed the most dramatic gasp I'd heard since she failed to place at her middle school talent show. "Sylvie Jean Lockhart." My mother had suddenly recovered enough to use my full name, the universal signal that I was now the villain in this Lifetime movie. That album had historical family value. "So did my marriage vows, Mom, but apparently those were biodegradable," I replied, aggressively stirring the macaroni salad like I was trying to interrogate information out of it. Archie, ever the marketing executive, recognized a PR crisis when he saw one. "It's fine, Martha. I have digital copies of all the important photos." He placed his hand on my mother's shoulder, the dutiful almost son-in-law. "Well, son-in-law adjacent now, I suppose." "Son-in-law relocated." "Of course you do," I muttered, always prepared with a backup plan. Thea, demonstrating her remarkable gift for reading a room exactly wrong, decided this was the perfect moment to clear the air. "Sylvie, we were hoping today could be the start of our new normal. You know, blended family style." "Blended family?" I repeated, my eyebrows achieving heights previously unreached. "Like a smoothie? Because this feels more like everyone's been put through a meat grinder." I gestured to my father, who was now stress-eating the decorative display of red, white, and blue cupcakes I'd spent 3 hours arranging that morning. My darling son, apparently deciding his documentary needed a plot twist, abandoned his camera on a lawn chair and approached the buffet table. At 16, Noah had inherited his father's height and my talent for perfect timing. "So, Dad, since you're dating Aunt Thea now, what should I call her? Stepmom? Aunt Mom? The sequel?" he asked, loudly enough for the neighbors on both sides of my privacy fence to hear. The kid deserved an Emmy for that delivery. Archie choked on his beer while Thea's smile froze in that particular way that yoga instructors smile when they're telling you to hold a pose that's actually dislocating your shoulder. "Noah, honey, I'll always just be your Aunt Thea," she answered, her voice transitioning to that special sing-song tone adults use when they're trying to defuse a conversational bomb while secretly checking the exits. "Cool, cool," Noah nodded, filling his plate with chips. "Just checking the new family org chart, trying to figure out if this makes me my own cousin." My father snorted so hard he inhaled a piece of cupcake wrapper. As my mother pounded him on the back, Deirdre and Bruce exchanged looks that clearly communicated their intention to skip their upcoming anniversary cruise if it meant missing the next episode of this neighborhood dumpster fire. "Noah," Archie started, his face attempting an expression somewhere between stern father and cool new boyfriend, failing spectacularly at both. "This is obviously an adjustment for everyone. Why don't we discuss how you're sleeping with Mom's sister?" "Great idea," Noah finished, with the brutal efficiency only teenagers can achieve. He then grabbed 2 sodas and retreated to his camera, leaving a mushroom cloud of awkwardness behind him. "He's still processing," I explained unnecessarily, while internally high-fiving my son. "The divorce has been hard on him." "You've always let him speak to adults that way," Archie said quietly, as if we were having one of our old parenting disagreements and not standing in the smoking crater of our former family. "And you've always had a talent for rearranging furniture," I replied sweetly, loading a plate with corn on the cob. "First the living room, then custody arrangements, now family members." Thea, attempting to salvage the situation, plastered on her most serene yoga instructor smile. "We're all just trying to find happiness, Sylvie. Archie and I didn't plan this." "Really? Because your planner was always color-coded down to the minute. Remember how you organized my bridal shower? Penis straws from 3:15 to 3:45 p.m., gift opening from 3:46 to 4:52. The neighbor's teenage daughter, who had wandered over to use our pool, suddenly became very interested in the conversation. "That's not fair," Thea replied, her voice quivering just enough to make my mother shoot me a warning look. "You know what's not fair?" I set down my serving spoon with a clang that made everyone jump. "Coming to my house, where I've invited friends and neighbors, to debut your relationship with my ex-husband? On Independence Day. The irony is just..." I gestured vaguely at the patriotic decorations surrounding us. "It's like breaking up with someone on Valentine's Day or firing someone on Labor Day. There's a special circle in Hallmark hell for that kind of timing." "We thought a family gathering would be better than telling you one-on-one," Archie offered, clearly regretting this strategic decision as much as his 2018 investment in cryptocurrency. "Because witnesses prevent homicide?" I asked brightly. "Because family supports each other," my mother interjected, having appointed herself mediator despite being on her 3rd Valium-enhanced spritzer. "And we're still family." I looked around at my backyard, transformed now from Instagram-worthy patriotic celebration to what felt like a very special episode of Jerry Springer, Suburban Edition. The American flag napkins seemed to be mocking me, little stars and stripes witnessing my humiliation. "Speaking of family," I said, reaching for my phone, "remember how Dad always said, 'Pictures or it didn't happen'? Let's memorialize this special moment." Before anyone could object, I'd corralled everyone into a group photo, positioning Archie and Thea together with my parents on either side. "Noah, you take it," I insisted, handing him my phone while retrieving his camera. "I'll man your documentary for a minute." As Noah snapped the photo, I quietly pressed record on his camera, making sure to capture every excruciating second of fake smiles and awkward body language. "Perfect," I declared. "One for the new family album. I'll make sure it's laminated. Waterproof." I glanced meaningfully at the pool. The tension was interrupted by Deirdre's husband, Bruce, who had reached the philosophical stage of intoxication. "You know what's crazy?" he announced to no one in particular. "Sylvie designed 3 rooms in our house. She made everything beautiful. Everything. And Archie, man, you walked away from that? For her sister?" He gestured with his bourbon toward Thea, sloshing some onto my patio stones. "That's some Shakespeare-level tragedy right there." A silence fell over the gathering, broken only by the sound of my father unwrapping another cupcake. "I think what Bruce means," Deirdre attempted damage control. Is that divorce is complicated and we shouldn't judge. No, what Bruce means, Bruce interrupted, is that it's messed up. It's messed up and we're all pretending it's not messed up because the potato salad is really good. He raised his glass to me in sloppy salute. I'd never appreciated Deirdre's husband more. Their Christmas gift had just been upgraded from homemade cookies to a premium wine basket. As the afternoon wore on, the strain of maintaining polite conversation became increasingly unbearable. Archie tried explaining how he and Thea had reconnected at SoulCycle, conveniently leaving out how often he'd mocked indoor cycling during our marriage as glorified sitting. Thea kept touching his arm possessively while shooting me nervous glances, as if checking whether each touch was landing like the emotional gut punches they were. The final straw came when my mother, 3 drinks past discretion, started reminiscing about my wedding day. It was just magical, she sighed, apparently forgetting that one of her daughters was now dating the groom from that magical day. Sylvie was such a beautiful bride. Remember the vows, Archie? So moving. Archie had the decency to look uncomfortable. It was a beautiful ceremony. It was, Thea agreed, then realized her mistake as everyone turned to stare at her. I mean, as the maid of honor, I had the best view. Second best view now, apparently, I muttered just loud enough to be heard. As the sun began its descent, casting long shadows across my carefully arranged backyard, I stood to begin clearing plates. Archie, perhaps attempting to normalize the situation, stood to help me. An act so familiar, it sent a jolt of muscle memory through my body before anger replaced it. Thanks, I said stiffly, but I've gotten pretty good at cleaning up messes on my own lately. Sylvie, he started. I cut him off. Fair warning. The HOA meeting next Tuesday is voting on amending the community relationship bylaws. Article 4, Section B may soon prohibit dating your ex's siblings within a 3-block radius. I've been gathering signatures. His confusion was almost worth the whole afternoon. She's kidding, Noah clarified, returning to his filming position. But man, your face was documentary gold. As I carried a stack of plates inside, I heard Thea ask, "Should we maybe go?" Just as Bruce loudly proclaimed, "This is better than when the Hendersons' dog interrupted the Easter egg hunt in a very inappropriate way." I paused at the patio door and turned around. Actually, before anyone leaves, I think Noah has an announcement about his documentary project. Don't you, honey? Noah looked at me, confusion crossing his face before understanding dawned. My son, bless his devious heart, caught on immediately. Oh, right. He held up his camera triumphantly. My documentary got pre-selected for the Young Filmmakers Showcase. They want raw family footage and today's been perfect. Archie and Thea exchanged panicked glances. Don't worry, I added with my sweetest smile. I'm sure they'll edit out anything too revealing. Or not. Art is so unpredictable these days. Nothing scatters a family gathering faster than the threat of public documentation. Within 20 minutes, my backyard had emptied like a Target on Black Friday after the last discounted TV is sold. Only my parents remained, with my mother methodically collecting abandoned cups while muttering about family legacy, and my father attempting to resurrect the grill situation, likely to avoid actual conversation. Well, I said, collapsing into an Adirondack chair and kicking off my sandals. That went exactly as planned. You planned for your sister to bring your ex-husband to your barbecue? My father asked, genuinely confused. No, Dad. That was sarcasm. It's this thing I do to avoid screaming into the void. Noah sat down beside me, camera finally powered down. For real though, Mom, this footage is gold. The way Aunt Thea kept touching Dad's arm while staring at you for approval, textbook passive aggression, and when he tried to help with the dishes, pure dramatic irony. My son, the Scorsese of suburban treachery, I said, ruffling his hair. Just remember, documentary ethics require consent forms. Already got verbal consent when Dad was helping himself to a third burger. I asked if I could use today's footage for my school project, and he nodded. I looked at my son with newfound respect. You're either going to be a brilliant filmmaker or an exceptional lawyer, possibly both. The world isn't ready. My mother emerged from the house, her cleaning frenzy apparently complete. Sylvia Jean, this situation is unfortunate, But your behavior today was unbecoming. Unbecoming? I repeated. Mom, this isn't Victorian England. Thea is dating my ex-husband. I think I'm entitled to a little unbecoming. Your sister deserves happiness too, she insisted, though her expression suggested she found the situation as distasteful as finding a hair in her country club salad. And she couldn't find it with any of the other 1.8 million men in Phoenix? She had to go dumpster diving in my romantic past? Thea has always looked up to you, my father interjected, abandoning all pretense of grill repair. Maybe this is her way of, I don't know, being like her big sister. By dating my leftovers? Dad, that's not admiration, that's identity theft with extra steps. My phone chimed with a text notification. Speak of the she-devil, I muttered, seeing Thea's name on the screen. I opened the message, read it twice, then let out a laugh so sharp it made my mother jump. What is it? Noah asked, leaning over. Your aunt wants to clear the air over brunch tomorrow. Just the two of us. I showed him the text. Apparently, she's concerned about family harmony and moving forward positively. Are you going to go? My mother asked hopefully. Oh, I'm absolutely going, I replied, already mentally assembling my outfit. What kind of sister would I be if I didn't support Thea in her time of whatever this is? Sylvie, my father warned, using his old courtroom voice from his days as a paralegal. Don't make this worse. I'm not making anything worse. I'm having brunch with my sister. It's practically a Hallmark movie. After my parents finally left, my mother with one last pointed look and my father with an awkward pat on my shoulder, Noah and I retreated to the kitchen to finish cleaning up. You're plotting something, Noah observed, loading the dishwasher with the precision of someone who had been lectured multiple times about optimal dish placement. I'm not plotting. I'm strategizing. Same thing, different tax bracket. I smiled despite myself. When did you get so cynical? Probably around the time Dad moved out and started posting midlife crisis gym selfies on Instagram. He closed the dishwasher and leaned against the counter. Seriously though, Mom, what are you going to do? I considered my son's question as I wiped down the countertops. What was I going to do? The initial shock was wearing off, leaving behind a cold clarity I hadn't felt since the day I found Archie's text messages to his work colleague Jessica 2 years ago. Messages that had ultimately led to our divorce after I discovered his late meetings were actually dates at restaurants just far enough from our neighborhood to avoid detection. Noah, hand me your laptop, I said suddenly. He raised an eyebrow, but fetched it from the living room. I opened it and started typing. First, I'm going to this brunch. Then I'm going to have a very enlightening conversation with your aunt. About what? I turned the laptop screen toward him, showing the social media profile I'd pulled up. About how your father hasn't changed a bit. Noah's eyes widened as he scanned the Instagram page belonging to a woman named Melissa Coleman, a blonde SoulCycle instructor whose recent posts featured a familiar-looking wristwatch in the corner of several photos, along with captions about secret meetings and waiting for him to make a choice. Is that Dad's watch? Noah asked, zooming in on one particularly damning photo. The one I got him for our 10th anniversary? With the custom engraving? Absolutely. So he's cheating on Aunt Thea too? I closed the laptop. Let's just say your father has a type. Women who aren't his current partner. How long have you known? I just connected the dots today. Remember when your dad mentioned reconnecting with Thea at SoulCycle 3 months ago? Well, Melissa here has been his instructor for 6 months, according to her profile. The timestamps align perfectly with when he started getting really into indoor cycling. Noah processed this information with a maturity that made my heart ache. So what's the plan? First, we verify. I need to be absolutely certain. I reopened the laptop and pulled up a calendar app, showing Noah the scheduling system for the SoulCycle studio. Your dad always goes to the 6 a.m. Tuesday and Thursday classes, according to what he told the custody mediator about his fitness routine. And look who teaches those classes. Melissa Coleman, Noah read. But how do you know he's actually, I don't, not with absolute certainty. But there's an easy way to find out. I pulled up another screen, this time showing an email confirmation. I've just signed up for this Tuesday's 6 a.m. class under a fake name. If I see anything suspicious, I'll have my answer. That's borderline stalker behavior, Noah pointed out. It's investigative journalism, I corrected. Supporting your documentary career. And if you're right, what then? I closed the laptop again. Then I give your Aunt Thea exactly what she deserves. The truth. The next morning, I arrived at Perch, the trendy brunch spot Thea had selected downtown, 15 minutes early. I'd chosen my outfit carefully, casual enough to suggest I wasn't trying too hard, but polished enough to telegraph that I wasn't falling apart. My hair was blown out, my makeup subtle but flawless, and I'd chosen a sundress that Archie had always said made me look too intense, code for too intimidating for his fragile ego. I ordered a mimosa and waited, mentally rehearsing what I would say. When Thea arrived, her face registered genuine surprise at seeing me already seated and composed. She'd clearly expected to establish home field advantage by arriving first. "Sylvie," she greeted me, air-kissing near my cheek. "You look great. You sound surprised." I smiled. "Did you expect me to show up in sweatpants and smeared mascara? Sorry to disappoint." Thea sat down, arranging her designer handbag, a knockoff of the one I'd received from Archie last Christmas, beside her chair. "I just meant you look well, considering everything." Amazing what righteous indignation can do for the complexion. Better than Botox. A server approached, and Thea ordered an elaborate avocado toast with 6 modifications and a green juice. I resisted the urge to roll my eyes. "So," she began once the server had left. "Yesterday was awkward." Was it? I hadn't noticed over the sound of my wedding album drowning and my son contemplating whether he's his own cousin now. Thea had the decency to blush. "I know how this looks. Like you're dating my ex-husband? Because that's exactly what it looks like, Thea. It just happened. We didn't plan it. Things don't just happen. The Spanish influenza just happened. This was a series of choices." She fidgeted with her napkin. "Archie and I have a connection. We understand each other. That's fascinating, considering he still doesn't understand how to separate laundry after 11 years of marriage. But I'm sure you'll fare better." Our food arrived, creating a momentary buffer in the conversation. I watched as Thea meticulously arranged her avocado toast for what I assumed would be an Instagram post later. "I didn't ask you here to argue," she finally said. "I want us to find a way forward. For the family's sake." By family, do you mean the one you're trying to insert yourself into? Because Noah's doing just fine without an aunt-stepmom hybrid. Noah adores me. We've always had a special bond. I nearly choked on my mimosa. He tolerates you at Christmas because you bring good gifts. That's not a bond. It's capitalism. Thea's eyes narrowed. You're just bitter because Archie moved on. He told me how controlling you were, how you suffocated him. Is that what he said? I took a deliberate sip of my drink. Funny. That's exactly what he told me about his first girlfriend after college, and his work colleague Jessica during our marriage. It's almost like he has a script. A flicker of uncertainty crossed Thea's face before she masked it. Our situation is different. Of course it is. I smiled sweetly. You're special. Just like I was special, and Jessica was special, and I'm willing to bet Melissa is special too. Who's Melissa? I checked my watch. Oh, would you look at the time? I have to run. Early appointment tomorrow morning. I stood, dropping enough cash to cover my meal. This was illuminating, Thea. Really? Let's do it again sometime after my SoulCycle class on Tuesday. The confusion on her face was absolutely priceless. As I walked away, I heard her call after me. Sylvie, you don't even like spinning. I turned and offered my most enigmatic smile. People change, Thea, but some people never do. Food for thought with your avocado toast. Monday morning, Noah helped me prepare for my covert SoulCycle mission with all the seriousness of a CIA handler briefing a field agent. Remember, maintain visual confirmation but keep a low profile, he instructed, adjusting the baseball cap he'd insisted I wear as part of my disguise. Dad's never seen you in workout clothes before 9 a.m., so that alone should make you unrecognizable. Very funny, I replied, zipping up a borrowed athletic jacket with a hood. I'm not completely out of shape, you know. I did hot yoga twice last month. Mom, struggling to touch your toes while sweating in a room full of strangers isn't exactly Navy SEAL training. I ruffled his hair, something he normally protested but allowed this morning in solidarity with Operation Cheater Cheater. I've got this. I signed up under Jane Smith and paid cash for a drop-in class. Jane Smith? Really? That's the most generic alias ever. Why not go with something like Phoenix Skywalker while you're being subtle? Because I want to be forgettable, not the main character in your father's next therapy session. Noah handed me his GoPro. For documentation purposes. Absolutely not. I'm gathering intel, not creating evidence that could be used against me in a restraining order. Fine. But take detailed notes. This is the climax of my documentary. I kissed his forehead. You're enjoying this way too much. Go to school and try to act normal if you see your aunt or father. Please. I've been acting normal around adults having meltdowns my entire life. It's practically my superpower. The Soul Cycle studio at 5:45 a.m. was a special circle of hell I hadn't previously experienced. Enthusiastic morning people in coordinated athleisure bounced on the balls of their feet, clutching water bottles and chatting about protein shakes while I struggled to adjust the seat height on my torture device disguised as exercise equipment. I positioned myself in the back corner, cap pulled low, hoping Archie wouldn't notice me among the sea of similarly dressed fitness enthusiasts. The studio was dimly lit with purple mood lighting. Small mercies. At exactly 5:52 a.m., Archie strode in wearing form-fitting cycling gear that made me momentarily question my life choices that had led me to this pre-dawn surveillance operation. He headed straight for a front-row bike, high-fiving several regulars along the way. Classic Archie, always needing to be seen, always performing. The instructor, Melissa Coleman, entered at 5:59 a.m. to enthusiastic applause. She was everything I'd expected from her Instagram. Blonde, toned, and radiating that particular brand of toxic positivity that suggests drinking celery juice can solve all your problems. She scanned the room, her eyes lingering on Archie for a beat too long, her smile shifting from professional to intimate in a microsecond. If I hadn't been looking for it, I might have missed it. But the visual confirmation hit me like a bucket of ice water. The class itself was a 45-minute assault on every muscle I'd neglected since my divorce. While I pedaled miserably in the back, wondering if it was possible to die from thigh burn, I watched the subtle choreography between Archie and Melissa, the unnecessary adjustments to his form that involved touching his shoulders, the private jokes shouted over pulsating music, the lingering eye contact during inspirational segments about breaking free and finding your truth. By the cool-down stretch, I was simultaneously exhausted and energized by fury, but I still needed concrete proof. Something more than suggestive glances and questionable playlist dedications. I didn't have to wait long. As the class emptied, I lingered by the water station, face partially obscured by my towel. Archie hung back, pretending to adjust his shoelaces until most people had left. Then Melissa approached him, leaning in close. Too close for a student-teacher relationship that wasn't violating several ethical boundaries. "Same time Thursday?" she asked, her hand casually resting on his arm. "Actually," he replied, lowering his voice to a volume he clearly thought was discreet. "I was thinking maybe tonight? Thea's got that workshop in Sedona until tomorrow." Melissa smiled. "My place. 8 o'clock. Don't be late this time." "Wouldn't dream of it," Archie replied, with the same smile he'd once used to convince me his work dinners were absolutely necessary and totally innocent. I'd seen enough. I slipped out before either could notice me, my heart pounding harder than it had during the actual workout. In my car, I pulled out my phone and texted Noah. "Mission accomplished. Solid gold intel acquired. Phase 2 is a go." His reply came seconds later. "Excellent work, Agent Mom. We'll prepare documentation materials." By Wednesday afternoon, Noah and I had assembled what he dramatically referred to as the dossier. Photos from Melissa's social media showing Archie's distinctive watch, and even, in one poorly angled mirror selfie, part of his face. Screenshots of Thea's own Instagram posts showing her in Sedona during times when Archie was clearly somewhere else, based on his cycling app data that Noah had somehow accessed. "It's public, Mom. He literally broadcasts his routes to everyone. The man has zero privacy settings." I'd arranged to meet Thea for coffee at the trendy cafe inside her favorite bookstore. Public enough to prevent a scene, private enough for a meaningful conversation. When she arrived, 15 minutes late and already on her phone, I had everything prepared. "Sorry I'm late," she said, not sounding remotely sorry. "Archie and I were having brunch with the Hendersons. You remember Bruce and Carol? From your spin class?" "I remember them from my neighborhood, Thea. They live 3 doors down." "Right, of course." She settled in, arranging herself artfully in the chair. "Anyway, I'm glad you reached out. I think our last conversation ended a bit abruptly." "It did," I agreed. "I wasn't ready to hear everything then. But I am now. In fact, I'd like to share something with you." I slid a manila envelope across the table. Thea looked at it skeptically. "What's this? Divorce papers? Because we've already been through that drama." "Just open it." She did, her expression shifting from confusion to disbelief as she flipped through the contents. "What am I looking at exactly?" "Evidence that your boyfriend, my ex-husband, is cheating on you with his SoulCycle instructor Melissa Coleman, the same way he cheated on me with Jessica from work." Thea's face flushed. "These are just random photos. This proves nothing." Page 4 has a screenshot of his cycling app showing him at her apartment complex at midnight last week, when he told you he was at a client dinner. I added the property records showing she owns Unit 3B. Public records are amazing, aren't they? She flipped to the page, her carefully manicured facade beginning to crack. He could have been visiting someone else there. "Funny coincidence that would be," I replied, taking a sip of my coffee. "Especially since page 6 shows their text exchange that Noah recovered from the family cloud account Archie forgot to disconnect from." Her hands trembled slightly as she turned to the damning messages. I wasn't proud of the invasion of privacy, but as Noah had pointed out, moral high ground doesn't make for compelling third acts, Mom. "I don't understand," Thea whispered. "We've only been together 3 months. And he's been seeing Melissa for at least 2 of those months," I finished. "It's his pattern, Thea. He did it to me with Jessica and before me with his college girlfriend. He's incapable of fidelity." The color drained from her face. "Why are you showing me this? To hurt me? To say, 'I told you so'?" I leaned forward. "Believe it or not, I'm showing you this because you're still my sister. And as much as you've hurt me, I don't want you to waste years of your life like I did, thinking you're the problem. That if you just try harder or look better or complain less, he'll finally be faithful." Tears welled in her eyes. "I thought I was special. That what happened with you was different. Every woman in Archie's life thought she was special. That's his superpower. Making each woman feel like she's the exception, not the rule." Thea wiped at her eyes, smearing her carefully applied makeup. "What do I do now?" "That's entirely up to you," I replied, gathering my things. "But if I were you, I'd start by changing the locks on your yoga studio. He still has the key you gave him, right? The just-in-case key?" She nodded numbly. "Trust me on this. With Archie, there's always a just-in-case." I stood to leave, but Thea grabbed my wrist. "Wait, I need to know one thing. If you knew about Melissa, why tell me? Why not just let me find out the hard way?" I looked down at my sister, seeing for the first time in years not my competitor, but the girl who used to climb into my bed during thunderstorms. "Because then you'd be me, Thea. And one of me in this family is more than enough." As I walked away, my phone buzzed with a text from Noah. "Phase 2 complete?" I typed back, "Target neutralized. Prepare for fallout." His response came quickly. "Copy that. Dad just called, sounds stressed, asked if he could come over tonight to talk about some things." I smiled to myself as I got into my car. Perfect. Set the stage for Phase 3, grand finale. Archie arrived at 7:30 p.m. sharp, his hair still damp from what I assumed was a hasty shower at Melissa's apartment. He stood on my doorstep, our old doorstep, clutching a bottle of wine from the vineyard we'd visited on our 10th anniversary, a peace offering so transparent I could practically see through to his ulterior motives. "Come in," I said, taking the wine but making no promises about drinking it. "Noah's upstairs finishing homework." "Actually," Archie shifted uncomfortably, "I was hoping we could talk privately. Adult to adult." "Fascinating concept," I replied. Let me just check if the adult I'm speaking with is the same one who's dating my sister while simultaneously pursuing his spin instructor, or if I'm meeting a new persona tonight. His face registered shock, followed quickly by defensive anger. A transition I'd seen countless times during our marriage. What are you talking about? Let's skip the part where you deny everything, then admit to a small portion when presented with evidence, then blame external factors for your choices. I've already seen that episode, and the reruns aren't improving with age. Noah appeared at the top of the stairs, camera conspicuously absent for once. Hey, Dad. Noah. Archie nodded. Could you give your mom and me a minute? Sure, Noah replied. Just so you know, though, the walls in this house are pretty thin. Like, I can hear everything thin. Almost as thin as dating your ex-wife's sister while cheating on her thin. Archie's jaw tightened. That's enough, Noah. Is it? Because it feels like we're just getting started. My son descended a few steps. Mom said I should give you privacy, but I wanted to say something first. That documentary I've been making? It's not actually for school. It's for me. To understand how families break and rebuild. And you know what I've learned? Archie and I both stood frozen, listening. Some things break because they were designed to fail from the beginning. Like relationships built on lies. Noah looked directly at his father. I'm going to my room now, but just remember, I've gotten really good at audio editing. Great skill for college applications. He retreated upstairs, leaving behind a silence heavy with implication. Archie ran a hand through his hair. What have you been telling him about me? Nothing he hasn't figured out himself. Noah has something you seem to lack, observational skills. Thea called me crying today, he said, changing tactics. You showed her some doctored photos and texts trying to sabotage our relationship. That's a new low, Sylvie, even for you. I laughed, genuinely amused by his audacity. I'll admit, I expected denial, but calling actual evidence doctored? That's creative. Did you use that line with your SoulCycle girlfriend too when Thea asked about the late-night sessions? His expression confirmed everything. Look, it's complicated. It's really not, I interrupted. It's actually impressively simple. You cannot be faithful to save your life. It's pathological at this point. I came here to talk about co-parenting, not to be ambushed about my personal life. Your personal life became fair game the moment you decided to date my sister. You crossed the line from ex-husband to family wrecking ball. Archie paced the entryway, his carefully constructed facade crumbling. Fine. Yes, Melissa and I had a thing, but it wasn't serious. And Thea and I are working through it. Congratulations. I'm sure your couple's therapist will find your serial infidelity fascinating. Maybe you can get a group discount if you include all your romantic interests. You're enjoying this, aren't you? He accused. Seeing me suffer. I considered his question seriously. You know what? A week ago, I probably would have been. But now? I mostly feel sorry for you. That stopped him. Sorry for me? Yes. Because you're going to spend your entire life chasing the next dopamine hit of new attention, never actually experiencing the depth that comes from genuine commitment. You'll never know what it feels like to be truly known by someone and loved anyway. For a moment, vulnerability cracked through his defensive exterior. Sylvie, save it. I didn't invite you here for closure or reconciliation. I invited you to tell you I'm done playing supporting character in your ongoing drama. Noah and I are writing our own story now. What does that mean exactly? It means I want you to leave. It means when you inevitably crash and burn with Thea, you don't come looking to me for emotional support or validation. It means I've graduated from being your ex-wife to being your past, period. He stood still for a moment, processing. And Noah? Noah will always be your son. But he's also becoming a remarkably insightful young man who sees more than you give him credit for. My suggestion? Start being worthy of his observation. Archie nodded slowly, the realization that he'd lost more than just a marriage finally dawning on him. For what it's worth, I am sorry. For all of it. I know, I said, opening the front door. But sorry doesn't unring bells or unbreak trust. It's just a word. After he left, I found Noah sitting on the landing, pretending he hadn't been eavesdropping. Is he gone? He asked. For now. maybe for good in some ways. Are you okay? I sat beside him, resting my head on his shoulder. Surprisingly, yes. Better than I've been in a long time. 3 months later, I hosted another barbecue in my backyard. The guest list was smaller this time, just friends who had earned their place in our rebuilt life. Noah was documenting this gathering too, but with a different focus. What happens after the explosion, when the dust settles and new growth begins? Thea came, without Archie. Our relationship was tentatively healing, one awkward coffee date at a time. She'd changed the locks on both her heart and her yoga studio, and was slowly becoming the sister I remembered from before relationships complicated everything. As the afternoon sun cast long shadows across my lawn, Noah set up his camera on a tripod and gathered everyone for a group photo. "Shouldn't you be in it too?" I asked. "Nope. I'm the documentarian. I capture the stories. I don't star in them." I looked around at our mismatched family, repaired in some places, still fractured in others, but authentically ours. "You know what they never tell you about happy endings?" I said to no one in particular. "What's that?" Thea asked. "They're never actually endings. They're just peaceful pauses before the next chapter begins." As Noah counted down for the photo, I raised my glass in a silent toast to broken patterns, hard truths, and the unexpected freedom that comes from finally stopping the dance you've been performing your entire life. Turns out, independence isn't just a holiday. Sometimes it's a hard-won state of being that tastes surprisingly like victory with a side of perfectly grilled hamburgers. No drowning photo albums required.